Hey guys, welcome to part 2, and what we're going to do first is we're going to build our game details component, then we're going to build our router. So let's go ahead and do that. I'll build it out and then I'll go through and explain it. Here in the game detail component, we want to pull in the details for our specific game that we're looking at. Just like we were doing in the game component where we were pulling in all games, we want to pull in an individual one for this component. So what we're going to have to do is we're going to have to go into our API and we're actually going to have to make a new endpoint there. I don't know if you remember here, but in the first part we talked about doing this cross origin. We also have another method here. This is going to get game by ID, and it's going to take a path variable, which is something that's being sent through the actual URL. So if we go to the URL here, we can see that this is 123. That is going to be passed into here for this ID on the API. And this is just our controller endpoint. We're also going to need the cross origin here. Okay, so let's go into the service, and this is the service endpoint. It looks very similar to getting all games, except now in our repository we created a custom method here, find game by ID, and we give it the ID from our parameter here. So let's look at this. This is a custom method that we created. This is not a JPA method at all. This is just one that we created on our own. And this will find our game by ID. And that's all there is really to getting a game by its ID in the API. So now let's go ahead and head over to the UI and implement that. So now we've built out the ng-on-init method for the game's detail component. This is going to bring in our details for our game. So we did this. This is very similar to the game component. And if we go into game service, we created another method here that passes an ID. And here's the get. And now we're using template strings here to put the API URL in a variable and a slash with the ID so that it matches our URL that we have in our API. I went ahead and changed it a little bit. I got rid of the slash up here and put the template strings around here just to demonstrate what template strings look like. So now let's go ahead and go here into our games. So I believe the Overwatch was ID 5, so if we do that, we hit enter, we see that we still are on the same HTML because we haven't messed with that, but we do have the details of Overwatch's game details right here. And if we do 6, we should get a different one. Okay, this is Apex Legends. So now let's look at another ID. So let's go to ID 10. Okay, we get an error. So let's go ahead and look at our API, and we have an error message here that says failed to find game with ID. That's because that message is hitting our API, which we have here, failed to find game with ID. So it looks like everything is working. Now let's go ahead and let's start building out the HTML for the details page. Here we have the final product for the details page. So we have up top a game list button, and then we have another card here that has the name, description, year, and platform. And this is for the Overwatch game. So if we go into our WebStorm, we can see the HTML behind it here. So we have a button here with a class so that we can add custom CSS. We have a method here that I'll explain in a little bit. And then here we just have a card inside here that displays all our details with bold tags and just the data that was rendered from our game. And we have this here so that our card only loads in if we have a game. So if we go and let's say that we're looking for game 10, well, we don't have that game, right? So when I hit enter, we just have a games list button. And this game list button is going to go back to our games list when we click it. Now we have no way of going back into our game list yet, but we can manually go there by going to the URL. So if we go and we look at this method go to games list, this is right underneath our ng on init, and it just invokes this.router.navigate, and we give it games, which is saying go to the games URL. That's all that's saying. Alright, so now let's go and let's look at hooking up the other side, the games list, and going into the details, and then we'll apply some styles. Okay, so now we can go and we can refresh this page, and we can click on these individual cards and they go into the details. So for Apex Legends, we click it, we have Apex Legends here. Civilization 6, we click it, we can go in there. Now we have a way of going back and forth in our UI. And what we did is we went ahead and we created this inside game component, we created a games details method. And really what we should call this is, let's call this go to game details, and then we'll just copy this, go into the HTML and do that. Just to make it a little more clear, we want to have clear method names. So in the HTML we say when we click on a P card with this is just an Angular click listener, we're going to invoke this method and we're going to send it game ID, which we're getting from our game in our for loop. So we pass it that, it knows which ID we're talking about, and we say build this URL that has games/ID, right? So this is just a URL builder, pretty much is how you can think of it. So if you go here and you click it, if you look at the top of the URL, I click it and it builds it games in 5. So that's our URL builder. So now let's just apply some quick styles just to kind of bring out the data a little bit. So I'll apply a style to the background. I'm going to apply it in styles.css so that it applies everywhere. Okay, and this is just setting a simple HTML background. We have this light blue shade, and we're going to make the text color white. So let's go ahead and take a look at that. Okay, so now we have a blue background. That looks pretty good. We can see those cards clearly. The only thing I don't like is this button, so let's clean that up a little bit. Okay, so the first thing we're going to do is apply a little styling to the back button here. Let me make sure I name this right. So if I go into my game detail, okay, so yes, we do have a class on the button. It's called back button. So I go to my CSS back button. Cool. So we're applying a padding of 0.4 rim, so around the edges it's gonna bring it in. We're putting a border, white border around it. We're making the background transparent so that it inherits the blue behind it. We're gonna make the text color white, and we're gonna make a little bit of a margin between the button and the card. So let's take a look at that. And here we are. So we have the games list here, and then the card there. There's a little bit of space, but it's kind of weird because there's no indication that we're actually hovering over it. So let's build a little something for that. Okay, so here we just put a hover pseudo selector on there. So when we hover, the background is going to be white, and then it's going to give the text color that same background color of our page. So it should kind of transition nicely. Let's see what it looks like. And there it is. So when you hover over it, it kind of inverts the colors, gives it a nice look. So we can click it and go back. Okay, and now everything's kind of bumping up along the sides a little bit. Let's clean that up too. Okay, so the way we're going to do this is we're going to have to adjust the sizes on each of the sides of the page, and we want that to apply to all pages. So we're going to go up to our root CSS element here, our app component.css. This is a little bit under styles and a little bit before our individual component CSS. So this is a good place to put it. We have our app content here with some margins. This is top, bottom, left, right, and our app content is in our HTML, and we have that class here. And then our router outlet is in between. Our router outlet is what's going to be rendered in between that area, so all our page content is wrapped around this app content, which now has a margin. So let's go ahead and let's look at that, and there it goes. It tightens it up, it makes it front and center. So now our app looks pretty good. We have our data being displayed in a nice fashion. We can go to each individual card, and that's really it. I think everything looks nice, and that's really all there is to creating this this simple Angular application. So I hope you enjoyed, and give me a like if you liked it, and let me know, give me any feedback if there's something else you would like to see, or if you just liked the video. Alright, well, thank you guys, and have a good day.